Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of Reflection Talks. My name is Eleni, and I will be your host for today. I am the project and communications assistant of Youthmakers Hub. Reflection Talks is the theme of our Refl'Action vidcast series. For the ones wondering what a vidcast is, it is simply a podcast that contains video content. So the series include 4 episodes from April 2022 to May 2023, and each episode will explore a different topic related to the use of reflection as a practice to promote the well-being and transferability of learning to empower young people. For the ones who are watching us for the first time, Refl'Action is a project that focuses not only, as I said before, on using reflection as a practice to promote the well-being and transferability of learning to empower young people, but also to promote an active lifestyle aimed at conscious growth. The project has received funding from the European Union's Erasmus Plus program, and it is implemented from December 2021 until May 2023. It involves 3 partners from France, Italy, and Greece. So let's start. The topic of our episode is elements and techniques for designing and managing reflective activities. Let me introduce you to our guest for today, Francesca Salmeri, a facilitator of learning processes and researcher at Kamaleonte.
Thank you, Lenny. I'm really happy to stay with you today to talk a bit about our idea of reflection. As you say, I'm Francesca Salmeri. I work from Kamaleonte, an organization that has been involved in experiential learning in the outdoor environment for about 20 years. And I'm a facilitator of the learning process and a researcher, specifically focused on the reflective practice and way to help people to understand better themselves and grow up a bit.
That's perfect. So we have asked the Refl'Action audience to send some questions for Francesca. So let's see what the audience wants to know. So Francesca, how do you determine which reflective activities to include in a program or a curriculum?
I think when we plan a program, the first step is to think about the target group. Whether is the activity, if it's reflective, creative, sporting, or educational activities, it's always essential to consider the group that will have to face to develop a realistic and useful learning process for the participants. Specifically with the reflective activities, it's important to consider beyond the target group the goals that we want to achieve. As we have mentioned in our project research, the objective of a reflection can be really variable according to the circumstance, the people involved in it. For example, I can use a reflective activity in the formation phase of the group to facilitate knowledge and help the participant to observe and understand different points of view inside the group. But at the same time, the same activities can be useful for individual level. So I can propose the same activity to help the participant as individuals to reflect about maybe their strengths or their limitation. So it can be really variable. In addition to the target group and the goals, I think it's essential to consider the location, a variable, and the external and the internal environments, and the tools that we can use during the activity or the program. When these aspects have been considered, we can choose what reflective activities we want to include in our program. And I find very useful maybe to plan the first day of the course and to organize the following ones when I have met and know a bit better the group. Even in the case in a single day of activity, for example, it can be interesting to start the process with one or two activities that allow the trainer to discover something personal about the participants, to collect importance data, for the construction and the subsequent activities. It's good maybe also to prepare several activities, which may vary according to the circumstance, the weather condition, but also to the different personalities that we can meet.
Oh, that's so many things you have to take into consideration. So, can you describe a specific reflective activity that you have found particularly effective in a training or an educational setting?
Of course, it's about one of our memories together, because the first activity that comes into my mind now is the one that we did together during the training course of this project, so of the Refl'Action project. Was a very simple team building activity, but we decided to modify it in the relation of our group. So the activity required that the group should be able to regain arrow by a rope from a tree. But we decide to add some restriction and some limitation to all the participants. Of course, we don't want to put them in difficulty, but we want to help the participant to visualize themselves and in a more difficult condition because it lacks their strong points. Some participants, particularly inclined for the leadership, for example, could not direct the group. Others could not speak, or others had to carry out the activity with closed eyes. And from the trainer's point of view, I can say only this, the activity went very well because it allowed us to observe and get to know the participant more accurately. Likewise, also in the reflection phase, when the participants share their feeling with the group, this kind of activity gives them the opportunity to feel a strong sense of empathy. Each of them had experienced a different limitation, but no one had been advantaged or disqualified for it. And in addition, on an individual level, like we said before, it was an opportunity for a strong reflection on us. So on the possibilities that we have to use all our skills, not just those we feel more comfortable with. I think this is important because reflection is always a cyclical process. And when we decide to reflect on ourselves, in some way, we are always learning something. And in this case, I think the strong point of the reflection was to reflect about our skills and limitation, and also maybe to learn that one limitation can be also an opportunity to grow up. I think was a very good activity. It's a very simple example, but with a strong reflection moment after.
I really agree with that. So, how can trainers or educators manage the reflective process to ensure that it is productive and meaningful for the learners?
I think there is a strong connection also with the question that you already did to me, because the first point for me is again the knowledge of the group or the individual who experience the process. Observation of the people in which this kind of work is always the essential point. To be able to propose a reflection or a question that is really useful for the participant, I must have to interact with my group. I must have to study it a bit in some way. So the question that we are going to ask are really designed for the people that have to answer, and not just general ideas, but to invent really useful and specific question to help people to reflect. You have to be always honest and authentic. You cannot direct a reflective process pretending to be different from what you are. So I think also the authenticity is the key, not only the observation of the group, and can be really useful for me. Is really useful is my work to communicate with the group using specific moment and easy to understand example. So try never to express value judgments, but refer to fact, to something that you can really connect with. Of course, we are trainers, educators, but at the same time, we are people. So we have preconcept and judgment in our mind, and I think this is a strong point. Try to be open also to different point of view and different personalities that we can meet. Sometimes maybe for someone can be more difficult to share during a reflective moment, or also to be involved in the activity. And we have to know that we have to change our way to work sometimes also during the activity. I think, yes, honesty, authenticity, and be open to different point of view are the key.
Perfect. Okay. What are some challenges that you, as a trainer, or other trainers and educators face when they design and manage reflective activities, and how can this be addressed?
I think the most common that we can meet is the shyness of the participants. It can be difficult, we already said, for a person to share their thoughts or their emotion with a trainer or an educator or with a group of strangers. So I think the most important things is start to immediately to build a friendly and reassuring atmosphere and environment. I think is essential. Furthermore, we have always to think about our point of view and accept that they can be an obstacle. In this case, the trainer's role is to gain his participant trust, to lay the foundation for the reflective process. As a trainer, it's always good to respect people and different entry points, but also different needs. So we have to think that maybe some people prefer to be facilitated by movement, some maybe by natural environment, or other by language. Program open to possible change, but also trying to use several different methodologies, such, for example, creative technology or human supporting tools, all the things that we can collect to be sure to have a good starting point for all the different people that we can meet.
So you mentioned technology now, and I want to ask, how can technology be used to facilitate the reflective activities in a training or an educational setting?
Technology in itself is only a tool. It's not good or bad, but it could be really a extremely rich research from which we can draw both benefits or limitation. So we have to think a lot about, we have to be aware when we decide to use technology. Like many other tools, I believe that technology can be useful for reflection, but we have to choose how we want to use it. For example, if I want to work on the body, I have to think that use technology maybe could be not the best idea, because put me in a more limitation way, because I can stay, maybe if I use, like in this moment we are chatting, but we can't touch our body. And maybe so I can choose to work on different things, but at the same point technology give me the opportunity to open my activity also to the people that maybe can't move themselves, maybe for a physical limitation. So of course I can decide to put something that is based on I don't know, on a call with the laptop, for example, to involve also people that can stay with me during the activity. Only a very simple example. But for example, I was in a training course once time, and we did this very simple activity using our smartphone. Was funny because the activity was aimed to connect more with the nature that was around us. So at the beginning, we start to say, it's strange to use our smartphone to connect with the nature. But the trainers explained to us and asked to us to use only the camera of our smartphone to collect some interesting picture about one very interesting natural element for us. And after we had to discover something on internet, so again with our smartphone, really interesting about that natural element. I used to do this activity a lot of time, and I did it with a lot of different group. In particular, I really like to do it with the children or kids, because I think it's very important also to offer a different way to use the same tool. So maybe kids used to use the smartphone to play video games or to stay on the social network, but they discover also another way to use a tools, and a lot of times start a really good reflection moment about it, because they say, I really don't know that I can use my phone in this way, discover something new. And also in the relation with the parents or with the teacher can be a very strong point, no, to develop something some different learning path for them. So I think that we have to be aware in the way we want to use technology, but also the most simple social network can be useful also for our work. I personally start to learn how to draw using the social network, following different artists or interesting people for me. So I think it's a very strong and difficult point to develop, but we have to learn about it.
Yeah, I totally understand. And you mentioned the smartphone, and that example is really connected to our next question. On, in general terms, how can reflective activities be customized to meet the needs and learning styles of different learning core groups?
Yeah, like we say also before, people are different. So of course you have to create different kind of reflective activities. Of course, it's good to start with generic, I mean very big, that can involve more people that is possible, reflective activity. And also to think about different tools, what like we say before. For example, I can also leaving to the participant of an activity, they choose that the tools they want to use for their reflection or for their sharing, and they can decide to write or to draw or to remain in silence. Maybe is not the tools that they choose that express their self, but maybe for some people can be more difficult to share with words, and they can have the opportunity to share with other tools or other way to be. Sometimes, for example, participant facial expression can say much that one word. So we have always to observe our group. And also when we think about the activity, if I decide to start the reflection activity with a new group in a very strong way, put a lot of limitation, or maybe a lot of body moment or sharing moment, of course could be more difficult. So it maybe can be useful to planning the reflective activity and try to include in the program a sort of schedule which gradually leads the participant to a greater stage of reflection. We can start with a simple guiding question and leave the space to express themselves without demanding or pressing too much. It's very important. And gradually, through greater knowledge of our groups, it will be easier to direct the reflection toward the specific objective of the people who make up the group. The key for me is always, again, the observation by the trainer.
Okay. Okay. So, can you give us some examples of how reflection can be used to support the development of specific skills or competencies?
Yeah, of course. But about this, I think is the first thing is to don't think of a sort of magic moment that happens in a single moment. Reflection, of course, is a powerful tool, but it's a process. So a trainer, of course, can choose reflective activities that make easier for the participant to observe themselves, and maybe choose this like a starting point also to discover which kind of skills you want to develop, which kind of skills you think you have more or less, maybe. And use again the authenticity, because choose a reflective activities like to put a mirror in front of our personality and our abilities. So at the beginning, for me, it's more important to work about the ability of the participant to observe each other without judgment, of course, but with honesty. So without judgment, but with the open mind that you need to understand, okay, it's true, I'm not so good in leadership, for example. So what I can do for myself to grow up a bit in this. And I don't know, for example, during during a team building activity, a very simple one, the participant, you notice that the participant find difficult to listen or to respect each other. You can decide to start a reflection moment about this, so about the ability to listen and to respect each other, and help the participant to understand in which way we can respect more ourselves, in which way we can listen more all of our ideas. And at that point, after the reflection, can be really useful to give the possibility to repeating the challenge. So emphasizing the part that you think they miss in that moment. So, okay, we want to do it again, but in this moment, you have to think about the reflection. So
Okay.
in which way you can listen more.
Okay.
And I think it's important to have practical results every time. So if you notice something, to work off that point and not to forget it, to help really the participant to develop what they want to develop or what you think is useful for them. I think so.
Okay. So the audience's last question is, how do you measure the impact of reflective activities on learning outcomes and program success?
Audience, it's impossible. No, I'm joking. I think that, again, we have to observe the change within the groups. I don't think it's possible to indicate a scale of votes from 1 to 10, for example, on the success of a reflection, because most of the time it's a very personal fact or a transformation that requires very different time for different people. But as a trainer, I try to develop activities and the reflections specifically designed for the group I'm working on. So I try to check every moment, every time the change inside the group. And a lot of time I start to try to work on the shyness and the public communication of the participants, because I think can be really useful to help them to discover something new about themselves. And if I notice that is useful for them, I continue on this route. If I notice that it's not useful, I have to be able to change the roads every time. I think this is important. I think the only reflection activity that doesn't work is the canonical one. So the ones that you try to do without observing and without staying with your group. And a lot of time, the evaluation moment don't come from you, but come from the participant. So if the participants comes to you to say thank you, or to say, I discovered something new about myself, or I noticed this or this, and before I didn't know it, you did a good job. So I think the evaluation is on the end of the participant, not on the end of the trainer in this case.
Okay. Thank you so much, Francesca, for giving us a sample of the trail of thought of the whole designing reflective activities and practices. Do you have any final input or comment?
I don't know, maybe only try always to remember that the reflection is a process, and that includes not only thoughts or feelings or physical sensation, but always all this stuff. So if you want to create a reflection activity, remember that you need thoughts, feelings, and physical sensation always. I think it's important.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So that was episode 4 of the Reflection Talks. You can watch the first 3 episodes on the Reflection playlist on our channel. Thank you so much for watching, and do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media, and stay up to date. Bye.
Bye.